Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. Hey, architecture firm owners and emerging leaders. Get ready for unparalleled insight into the development of a world-class architecture firm and a worldwide organization driving the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. With Build Smart, the podcast that's changing how our profession operates. We share the incredible stories behind innovation in the building industry with my friend and co-host, Patrick McLeamy, FAIA, former CEO of the international architecture firm, HOK.
You know, Yamasaki's office or firm lasted during his lifetime. And when he passed away, I think that was the end of the Yamasaki office. Helmut did not want that. He wanted a firm that would live out and grow beyond the founders.
In Season 1, discover the untold stories behind HOK's meteoric rise, from 150 employees in St. Louis to a powerhouse with over 1,900 staff members and 27 offices worldwide.
You know, they weren't as polite as the Kojima people. That was just boom. And anytime you have a creditor, whether it's Kojima or the bank, that wants their money, unless you can raise money someplace else, you are out of business.
Bankrupt. And hold on tight for Season 2, where Patrick takes us on a new adventure as chairman of Building Smart International, shaping the future of digital transformation in the design, construction, and operation of built assets.
Ian Howell, Ken Harold, and I, Ken was my technical representative from HOK. The three of us took a tour of Europe of 5 cities in 5 days. Very busy time.
Simply follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Smart now and uncover lessons that will transform you and your architecture firm. My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to Entree Architect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. This episode of Entree Architect Podcast is supported by our platform sponsors. ARCAT, the online resource delivering quality building material information, CAD details, BIM specifications, and more, all for free. And Studio Services Bookkeeping, a division of Charette Venture Group, providing concierge remote bookkeeping services for small firm architects. Lee Skolnick, welcome to Entree Architect Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here, Lee. Lee Skolnick, FAIA, seeks to synthesize art, science, and architecture to create memorable and meaningful experiences. He unlocks each project motivating story to inspire imagination, curiosity, and understanding. For over 35 years, Lee has passionately developed and pursued his philosophy of design as interpretation, wherein he seeks to unearth the unique themes and compelling concepts which characterize each project and to translate them into concrete expression. Breaking down the barriers between disciplines, Mr. Skolnick has created an extraordinary firm where more than 30 designers and educators work in close collaboration. By making a thorough exploration and translation of content the starting point for design, he has brought depth, authenticity, and vision to an enormous array of diverse projects around the world. His museum, cultural institutions, and residential projects have been recognized as works of fresh innovation and inspiration. Very interesting portfolio of work. And he has a new book called Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership, Public, Private, presents its first monograph from the award-winning New York-based architectural firm, covering nearly 40 years of work. The book exhibits projects in both public and private sectors. And I want to talk about the book, Lee. I want to talk about your firm. I'd love to talk about your process. I love your architecture. I love the style of it. I love the feel of it. I love the way it presents. So I want to talk a little bit about how you get there. I also want to talk about, how you built the firm, right? Because that's something we're talking to an audience of small firm architects. Many of them are small firms because they want to be small firms. And many others are small firms because they're just starting. And they want to build a big firm like yours.
Sure. Right. Well, medium-sized.
Yeah, medium-sized firm. Yeah. I'd love to talk about that process. Before we get too deep into this episode, let's say thank you to our platform sponsors, ARCAT and Studio Services Bookkeeping. I'm hearing it more and more among the EntreArchitect community. Your workload is piling up. With project conditions changing and limited time to get things done, it's good to have information right there at your fingertips. ARCAT.com provides architects, engineers, spec writers, and contractors with the most comprehensive libraries of building product content. And it's designed so you can access it quickly and efficiently. Even better, ARCAT.com is free. It's free to use and requires no registration. So visit today at ARCAT.com and access the information you need now. That's ARCAT.com, ARCAT.com. Studio Services Bookkeeping, a division of Charette Venture Group, provides concierge remote bookkeeping services to small firm architects. Liberate yourself from bookkeeping tasks by outsourcing to trusted professionals who understand the nuances of your industry and your firm size. You can maintain control of your finances without doing all bookkeeping tasks yourself. Studio Services Bookkeeping goes beyond traditional bookkeeping to help you manage cash flow, analyze project profitability, handle invoicing, and streamline your financial systems. Learn how to start outsourcing your bookkeeping today at ss-bookkeeping.com/EntreArchitect. That's ss-bookkeeping.com/EntreArchitect. And mention EntreArchitect to get 5 hours of free bookkeeping with a 6-month contract. That's ss-bookkeeping.com/EntreArchitect. Please visit our platform sponsors today and thank them for supporting you, the EntreArchitect community. I want to know how you started. Where did you start? And share the journey from that point to where you find yourself today.
Sure, I'd be happy to start there. Well, I didn't set out to be an architect. These stories about kids who played with blocks and knew they wanted to build the world. I mean, I played with blocks like everybody else, and I drew, and I was artistic. Let's say, I like to draw, things like that. But it never occurred to me to pursue architecture as a kind of young kid or even a teenager. In fact, I was I was really most concentrated on music as a teenager. I was inspired by all the singer-songwriters who were on the airwaves, and I took up the guitar and then the piano and worked. I played in a million bands. I wrote music for commercials. I worked in recording studios, all before I was, 18.
Oh, wow.
And
so that was your dream? Music was your dream? Was that your
music
focus?
was my dream. I mean, my dream was to be one of the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to pick one dream, but I was a little late for that. But I was so convinced that music was my career path that I went to an undergraduate school in upstate New York, Hamilton College, as a music theory and composition major. And I was pursuing that, but a funny thing happened along the way. And that is that, like every good liberal arts school, they had a vast array of courses in all sorts of different disciplines. So, I was taking anthropology, I was taking physics, I was taking French cinema, I was taking English literature, I was taking sociology, psychology, etc. And I had really what I now refer to as an existential crisis, because the way it worked is, on a Tuesday morning, I would take a physics course and I would walk out of that class saying, I want to be a research scientist. I'm passionate about that. And then Wednesday afternoon, I would take an anthropology course and I would say to myself, oh God, I've got to go to Papua New Guinea and study the indigenous tribes. And then on a Thursday evening, I'd be watching French cinema and be saying, wow, wouldn't it be incredible to be a director? And I really started to wonder, would I ever be able to make up my mind? Because I found all these things to be so fascinating. And then, the serendipity stepped in, and I took an elective course in architectural theory and history from the beginning, from Vitruvius, well, at least the Western civilization, beginning Vitruvius, Alberti, Palladio, all the way up through to the modernists. And what I learned, particularly from the ancient philosophers, was that to be a good architect, you needed to be a student of everything. You needed to be a scientist, a politician, an artist, a theorist, essentially the ultimate humanist. And that you needed to constantly spend your life learning more about all these things and integrating them into your work. And only by doing that would you be a real architect, an honest to goodness, almost Renaissance person. And so it was the proverbial bolt of lightning, that hit me.
Yeah.
And I guess I was a junior, my early part of my junior year. And I finished out my junior year and I applied to the Academic Standards Committee at Hamilton College to allow me to do a pre-architecture major.
So they did not have architecture?
No, they just had history of architecture and that sort of thing. And there was no architecture program. And I said, well, I'm going to go and get a professional degree in architecture eventually. So can I create my own pre-architecture major program, with physics and calculus and history and studio art? And I put together this very comprehensive curriculum. And they said, well, that's very interesting, but no. And I said, well, that's very interesting. I'm leaving.
Yeah, goodbye.
So one of my professors had a friend who had an architecture practice in Brookline, Massachusetts. And so I went there, with my hat in my hand. And I said, will you hire me? And they said, well, we'll hire you, but we won't pay you. So I started out making blueprints in a closet, asphyxiating myself, from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night. I would, at the time, unlike my personal style now, I wore a tweed jacket, a vest, a striped shirt, a bow tie. I was trying to be the architect's architect. That's just what I thought architects looked like. And I did whatever they asked me to do. And by the end of the year, they had me designing buildings and paying me. And I went to the Boston Architectural Center at night. So, I mean, this was, architecture 24/7.
Yeah.
And along the way, I realized that, I needed to think about where was I going to go to get my architecture degree. And it was a very funny kind of story. I had decided that I was going to go out to Arco Santi in Arizona and work on this utopian city that this architect and poet Paolo Soleri was building. And so before I left, I applied to Cooper Union and thought, well, if I wind up back in New York after the summer, I'll go there. Not knowing that it was impossible to get into Cooper Union. I had no idea at the time, this was in the 70s, that this was kind of the epicenter of the architecture world.
Why did you choose Cooper?
It was free.
Okay. And so did you graduate with an undergrad at BAC?
I never did. I just took courses.
Just courses to get the education.
Right, and I had a year of apprenticeship, even though it was before having a degree. I sort of pieced things together, but I wound up back in New York that fall. I was not surprised that I got into Cooper Union until I found out how incredibly intelligent and talented all the other people were. And I couldn't believe that I had gotten in, but I got in somehow, and I spent 4 years there and got my degree in it. It literally changed my life. I mean, the education, this was under John Haydock at the time, who was a larger than life mentor, poet, philosopher, architect. And I got an incredible education. And so when I got out, I had put together a bunch of apprenticeships. I worked for professors while I was in school. And so I just took the exam and passed the exam and went into practice. I never worked for anyone else.
So you took the exam right out of school after working?
I took both parts. At that time, there was the part you took as soon as you graduated, and then the part you took after you did your apprenticeship. But I took them in succession because I had accumulated a bunch of apprenticeship time.
Yeah.
And so I graduated in 79, and I really opened my office, which means just me, in 1980.
How old were you when you licensed?
So I would have been 26.
So very early.
Yeah, it was very early, and like a lot of young architects, I tapped family and friends for little projects. If you needed your bathroom done, I would not only design it, I'd build it for you.
And you were based in New York at that time?
I was in New York, but another kind of a serendipitous thing along the way is, when I was doing my thesis at Cooper, which is a incredibly draining experience. I'm sure all of your listeners are familiar with it. Insanely, I also took on a project for my father to build an addition to a factory. So I was doing my thesis and designing this 40,000 square foot addition to this factory. And I was, my friends, my colleagues were saying, Lee, you're not going to last. You're going to burn out. You're going to find yourself, collapsing on the street someday. You've got to find some way to get a little bit of downtime. And I said, well, I don't have any money. What am I going to do? And one of my friends said, you need to rent a little house somewhere in the country and spend some time. You can work from there, but you just need to get some fresh air. And so I came out to this to the Hamptons. Now everybody knows the Hamptons as this posh upscale place. And I, even though I grew up in Queens, I had no experience with it other than knowing it was out there somewhere. So this was this was before I graduated. This was in 1978. And I wound up going to a realtor in this town called Bridgehampton because it was quote unquote undiscovered. And so I went to the realtor and I said, you know what, look, all I need is a bedroom and a kitchen. And she said, well, how much money do you have to spend? And I said, well, you know, I could probably pull together maybe $600 for the summer. And she said, what? $600? Even Bridgehampton at that time, that was ludicrous. She said, you know, there's a little town 4 miles north of here called Sag Harbor, and it really has not been discovered. This was 78. Yeah. She said, I think you should go over there and see if you could find something. And I went to a realtor, and they found me a 4-room cottage that was built in 1752. And it was attached to a larger house, but it was a separate little residence. And I rented it for a very little amount of money. And the realtors became friends of mine, and they started getting me work. I mean, work as in you would call me and say, I want a deck on the back of my house.
Yeah, right.
And so I started getting these little projects. At the same time, another stroke of serendipity, a friend, I won't go into all the machinations, but basically someone who was acquainted with a girlfriend I had at the time was the director of the Staten Island Children's Museum. And she recommended me to her program director and said, well, you know, I have this friend, he's an architect, and we need to design an exhibit for kids on the history of Staten Island. And she called me up and she said, would you be interested? And in my mind, I said 2 things. No, number 1 was, of course, I'm going to say yes. Number 2 is, I didn't even know people designed exhibits. I never thought about it before. But what came out of my mouth was yes. And so I got this gig to design an interactive exhibit for kids on Staten Island history. And at the same time, I was doing the decks out in Sag Harbor. And that actually became, I mean, I'm going through this because that became a duality, which to this day, 40 years later, continues in our practice. And, you know, the message to your listeners is if somebody offers you something, take it, because you never know where it's going to lead. And one of the things that was honestly in the back of my mind, even at that time, was I wonder if I get into the museum through the side door by designing exhibits, if maybe before I'm 70 years old, I'll get to design museums.
The whole museum.
Which is, you know, the plum commission for so many architects is to design whole museums. And it happened. I mean, not immediately, but I worked my way, you know, through a bunch of museums. And then by the time I was maybe 40, I was designing whole museums, the entire new building and all the exhibits, and which we still do to this day, 25 years later.
So when you did that, when you got that first exhibit to design and you enjoyed it and you saw that opportunity and maybe this could someday lead to a full design of a museum, did you consciously sort of plan out a strategy for that? Or was it just, let's just keep doing museums, we'll just do the next one that comes along because now I have experience with this one, I'll get the next one. Was it incremental or was it more strategic?
I'd love to say it was strategic, but it was really synergy. You know, one thing leads to another. You know, I can plot on the fingers of my, 2 hands the turning points in my career when something clicked, one thing led to another. One interesting thing, a phenomenon associated with the cultural work, the museum work in particular, is that the same people who are on the boards of museums own big companies and want very high-end residential projects. And that's what happened. There was this cross-fertilization where my residential work was gaining some more recognition and the museum work was, and then they cross-fertilized so that the people who I was meeting in the cultural world were also in this high-end residential world. And again, having camped out in the Hamptons, which I've never left. I mean, I'm still in the city, but we've been through 4 houses now out here, and we have a thriving practice in very high-end residential work out in the Hamptons, which is a nice place to be.
And that all led, that all came from that first project. So you were in that cottage, you were doing decks, you had a friend, the friend referred you to this museum exhibit project,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the seed.
And the realtor out here introduced me to their residential clients. They were selling people land, or they were selling the houses that needed to be renovated or added to. And, I could, if I ever had the time and inclination, I could plot out the entire
right.
kind of.
That's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Because it's very clear. And one of the things that happened out here, I'm in Sag Harbor right now, speaking with you. One of the things that happened was that they convinced me, even though I had no money, to buy a little house. And it was
the realtor convinced you to do
realtor. That? Well, they were always taking me out on field trips.
Yeah.
To look at property and just get acquainted, and they showed me this fisherman's cottage right across from the harbor in Sag Harbor, on an oversized lot where the old fisherman had passed away. It was on the market. I wound up buying it for $78,000.
Oh my goodness.
Which I borrowed, of course, and I got the smell of the fish out of it, and I did about $15,000 worth of renovation work to make it a little more attractive, and then I put it back on the market, and I sold it very quickly for $115,000, and I thought I was a real estate genius.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the important part. The important part, it was bought by a very accomplished and prominent artist. And she bought it to renovate it and add to it. And I got the commission to do that.
Yeah.
And that placed me in the art world, the high-end art world.
Right.
And so that led to another artist hiring me, which led to collectors hiring me, which led to museum people hiring me, which led to then just wealthy people who enjoy culture. And so again, like I say, I could plot this on a graph.
Yeah.
How one break, and that's what it takes. It's some decision making, and some just being very open to what's going on here. What are the possibilities? There may be more here than is just on the surface. And so at a certain point, I did develop a strategy, but it was based on responding to things that happened naturally. It wasn't based on, I'm going to get off the boat, from Europe and pound the pavement. And, it was a different kind of trajectory.
Yeah. The seeds that you plant there, did you, and they turned into these things, and you say you can plot this origin story. Were there things that you were doing, looking back, that were cultivating those relationships? So you were meeting these people were going to eventually lead to these projects. Was there anything that you were doing, either intentionally or looking back unintentionally, that helped you go from the connection to the commission?
I think it's a very natural thing. I enjoy people. So, and I think it comes across. So I'm not looking at someone as a paycheck. I'm not looking at someone as, what can I get out of them? I'm appreciating the relationship that we're developing. And I think that comes across. And, I also, one of the things that my artist clients have said to their artist friends when they're recommending me, they're saying, the thing about Lee that I find really unusual is he lets you draw on his drawings. I'm not so.
They're not precious.
They're not. It's the dialogue and the digging down into the the motivating forces for a project that keeps me going. So it's not about me coming in and saying, okay, I'm the architect in my black t-shirt and my Corb glasses, and I'm going to tell you what the hell you should have. I don't do that. I'm not interested in that. I'm honestly not interested. I'm interested in what they bring to the table that I can use to then, be an inspiration for the design. And I think that's what comes across. That, and when you go through the book, you'll see that every project is very different. We don't have a definable style, because when we approach a project, we say that our process is listen, learn, distill, create. And I give them all equal weight. So we don't start designing until we feel like we really understand every aspect of the situation and what is at its kind of essence. And once you do that, you establish a design direction. But you don't just jump in. I'm not the kind of architect who, waves my hand at the first meeting and says, here's my concept, take it or leave it. I mean, I find that really antithetical to what an architect should be.
Yeah.
And so I think it's honesty, it's really believing what you're talking about and living it, and not trying to sell something that isn't really there.
It sounds like much of back then and what you're just describing now through your process of architecture is that you are intentionally developing a relationship, right? You're listening, you're hearing, you're not trying to promote what you think, you're learning from them first. And that it sounds like that's what happened back then as well. You were making these connections, but you were building a relationship, which then led to those referrals. It sounds like the architecture today is very much the same way. You're listening to those clients, understanding what they do, understanding them as people first before the project, and then moving from that point forward. Is that accurate?
I think that's very accurate. And what substantiates that is a lot of those early clients are still my clients now.
Right. Yep.
I mean, we've done 3, 4, 5, 6 projects for these people, for their kids, for their in-laws, for them. We just finished a townhouse in New York, which was highlighted in Architectural Digest in September. It's the third gut renovation that we did to the same townhouse for the same client over the course of 30 years.
Yeah.
Because their lives changed, and they wanted to kind of sort of orient the way they lived, but they loved being in that location, and we had a great relationship. So they would call us back and say, you know what, it's time. I mean, look, obviously these people had a lot of money too, but they were able to say, we want a different lifestyle. Let's go back and rethink the entire house. And, we have another client who we did a house in Sag Harbor, a house in New York City, the wife's business, a house in Anguilla, an apartment for their son, and now we're working on an apartment for their daughter. And they're among my best friends. One of the things my wife pointed out years ago, she said, have you noticed, if you look around, that most of our closest friends are your former clients?
Yeah. Because
you develop such a close relationship, particularly on a residential project, that you know more about these people than anyone, maybe including their shrink. So, you become very close, and it's a very rich relationship.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear you say that. I interviewed Gene Cohn a couple months back, and one of the things he said, one of the principles of KPF, he said the same thing, that relationships was the key to his success, that understanding that complexity of who people are, being able to listen to them and truly authentically becoming friends with them, building relationships with them, then leads to the architecture and to the greatness that comes following that.
We did I was just on a Zoom call before this with a repeat client of ours. We did a beach house, a big beach house for this family. Wonderful people, just fantastic people, really warm and genuine and great family life. And and we had a great time working together. And then they just bought a penthouse in Manhattan, which we're now doing over. And it was so interesting. We were talking about, as one always does, the budget and what's going to fit within the budget and what's not going to fit within the budget. And I felt completely comfortable saying to them, "Look, you could cut this out, but I'm never going to be comfortable with the fact that you're depriving yourself of this thing." And it's not that I want them to spend more money.
Right.
That's not my motivation.
Right.
It's that I know them well enough that if they give up this one component of the project, it's going to affect their lives in a negative way. And it may seem great to save a few $1,000s now, but they're going to have this place for the rest of their lives. They're in their 60s. They're not going anywhere else. And to not do what I know, because I'm their friend,
right,
that they really want, is a mistake. And I felt completely comfortable saying it.
Yeah. So much of your success has come through this idea of relationships. I can assume. I want to ask you also in terms of, because I'm thinking about architects who are listening, and they look at your work and they can see your work in the book that it's called Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership, Public and Private. And you should go look at the book. The book is fantastic. It's beautiful, really well done. I want to talk about how it's structured in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to ask, Lee, is much of the timeline that you're talking about. You're in Sag Harbor. You're out in the Hamptons. The Hamptons, from that point on, has only grown to the point where you have lots of wealthy people living out there, lots of clients, potential clients, right? That you can connect with and build relationships with. Lots of these projects came from seeds that were planted in Sag Harbor, right? And the relationships that you built with people in those areas. So architects who are listening, who want to build a firm like yours and want to do the work like yours, how important is it to be to live and work in an area where those clients are? Can you build a firm like yours if you're not in a place like New York or San Francisco or LA?
That's a very good question. I don't know from experience because I haven't done that.
Right.
But I will say that there are other things that you should consider. It's not just where you live. It's also engaging with the community. So, one of the things, because I've from the beginning was doing public work, that is, museums, which morphed into libraries and schools and things like that. I became very much a part of the cultural, educational, and not-for-profit world in the community. And by the way, your listeners should understand, I'm out in Sag Harbor more than ever, mostly because of the pandemic right now. Right. Our office is in Manhattan, and our staff has been working remotely because of COVID. But we're firmly lodged in the culture of New York City, which is extremely rich, and I don't mean rich in money, but rich
culturally rich,
culturally and in depth and breadth. But we also do a lot of pro bono work, and for charitable organizations, not-for-profits, educational organizations, social service, and I serve on several boards. And that's something which your listeners should think about. How do you engage with the community? Yes, it will have positive repercussions for you professionally and financially, but it's also the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Again, I like to think that I've never done anything purely on a mercenary basis. I do it because I believe it's the right thing to do, and it yields positive results. But I didn't do it for the positive result. That's just what came about as a result of doing it. And so I think, there are people who just go on boards just so they can put, these things on their resume. And I often say on the boards where I serve, I'm not here to warm a seat. I'm here to get things done.
Yeah.
And so I engage quite deeply with the work of the organization so that I can be of real assistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's face it, I do get to meet a lot of people who either become clients or refer me to clients or get my work published and out in the public eye. There's all sorts of positive repercussions.
Yeah, and certainly there's an advantage to architects who work and live in New York and San Francisco and places like that.
There's a disadvantage too.
Oh, certainly, absolutely. Yeah,
there are 10,000 architects in New York.
Extremely competitive.
Yeah.
But what I want to make, because I hear this all the time, I can't succeed like that because I'm not there. But what you just said is if you have a community, right? We all have a community. Mm-hmm. We all have a place where we can serve. And so if you start to serve in that community, then people will start to get to know you, and you can start developing relationships with those people who are making decisions in your community, which can then lead to projects, which then you can grow from that project to the next project to the next project. And certainly there are many architects who are very successful doing fantastic architecture who don't live in New York and San Francisco.
Yeah, and I'm jealous of them. Yeah, no, it's true. There's also something to be said for regionalism. Mm-hmm. I look at certain architects who work in very specific locales, and their work is very, appropriate for that locale. Interestingly, when they reach a certain stature and they wind up spreading their wings to other places, it's sometimes with mixed results.
Yeah.
But when you see their work in situ in the place where they developed, it's, spectacular.
I love how diverse your work is. When you look through the book, again, it's Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership, public and private. We'll have a link to that on the show notes, the link to buy that book. It is a beautiful book. It is one of those books that you're going to buy and you're going to look at and you're going to put it on your table and it's going to be on your shelf. You should be referencing it for the work that you do. It's beautifully done. But it's interesting the way that you have designed this book, Lee, you and your team. It's two-sided, right? Much like your architecture firm. You're talking about public and private work. And so the design of the project or design of the book is done in a similar way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, when we started to think about putting together our work into a monograph, we came upon a conflict that we've always had, and that is that a lot of our work, fortunately for us, gets published or gets recognized by the public. And we would do these houses that would get published in Digest or other magazines, and people would come to me and say, our institutional clients would come to me and say, I saw this house published in Architectural Digest. It said Lee Skolnick. Is that the same Lee Skolnick? And I said, yeah, of course. What do you mean? They said, well, I thought you only did, institutional work, cultural work. And the same thing would happen on the other side, where we would have a museum get some recognition somewhere, and our residential clients would say, did you know that there's this architect, Lee Skolnick, who's doing these museums or libraries? And I said, wait a second. I always say, it's the same thing. The process is the same. But when we started to do the book, and I was talking to the publisher, I confessed that we had this confusion that we always run into. And we sat there and we said, wait a second, that's how the book should be organized. So it's the same book. It's one book. It's one firm. It's one practice that has produced work over the decades, but it has these two sides to it. So we worked with the book designer to create a book that you can open from either side.
It has two fronts.
It has two fronts. It has no back.
Yep.
And when you open it up, whichever way you start, you can continue. You don't have to turn the book over. When you get to the middle of the book, it just becomes the other side. So it's very ingeniously done. It's a little piece of architecture, really. And then the other thing is, I talk about how every project is so unique, and you have to dig down deep into what makes it tick. And, long ago, I started talking about narrative architecture and how architecture can be, the whole cliche now, but of storytelling through design. And so all of the projects in the book, I wrote the entire book, and I picked 14 projects. I think there's, 6 public and 8 private, or vice versa. And each one it's not, I had a cantilever here, or I, it's all about the story behind the project.
Yeah.
What was the essence? Who were the people? Why did it? How were we motivated? And what inspired the design approach? So each one is a story. It's a series of 14 little stories.
Yeah, I have a digital copy of it. I'm looking forward to getting a physical copy of it, because it's one of those things that you really need to have the physical copy to really enjoy it. So I'm going to do that. Lee, this has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you, learning about your origin story, learning about your firm. Looking forward to seeing the book. Again, his name is Lee Skolnick. The architecture firm is Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership. You can learn all about Lee and the firm at skolnick.com. We will have a link to that on the show notes. We'll also have a link to the book, Skolnick Architecture and Design Partnership, Public and Private. Lee, I appreciate you for what you're doing, and I appreciate you for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge here at Entre Architect Podcast.
Oh, this was fun. It was a pleasure.
If you liked this episode of Entre Architect Podcast, please share a rating, write a review, and share a link to this episode with a friend. Links to all the resources we discussed today are available at the show notes for this episode, found at entrearchitect.com/podcast. And thank you to arcat.com and Studio Services Bookkeeping for their support of this episode. Entre Architect is proud to be a partner with the largest, most engaged AEC multimedia network on the planet, Gable Media. We are curating thought leadership for an audience dedicated to building a better world. Listen and subscribe to all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABL media.com. And check out Entre Architect Academy membership. Ready to edit business resources for small firm architects, live monthly training, a supportive architect community, and Simple Systems, our new business system program developed for you, small firm entrepreneur architects. It's all waiting for you at Entre Architect Academy membership. Come join me and hundreds of your Entre Architect peers. Visit entrearchitect.com/join to enroll. entrearchitect.com/join. Be well, my friends. Be healthy, happy, safe, and secure. Thank you for listening. Love, learn, and share what you know.
Imagine earning continuing education credits while doing exactly what you're doing right now. Well, you can. Gable Media has revolutionized the way you earn your continuing education credits with a groundbreaking approach. Forget running around town and scouring the internet for credit-worthy courses. Fulfill your CE requirements effortlessly by listening to engaging podcasts just like the one you're listening to now. Our podcasts are designed to educate, entertain, and inspire, all in a user-friendly environment. But wait, there's more. Architects, Gable Media is also approved as an AIA continuing education services provider. Upon completion, we handle everything, from reporting your hours directly to the AIA to storing your certificates in your personal Gable Media profile for your self-reporting needs. So follow the link in the show notes and start earning your credits in the most innovative and entertaining way possible with Gable Media.
Attention architects and creative minds, get ready to supercharge your brand with Build Your Brand, the podcast that's unlocking the secrets of branding success for creatives. Hey there, it's Mark Arlepage, founder of Entree Architect, and I'm inviting you to join my friend, architect marketing expert Jeff Eccles at Build Your Brand podcast, where he explores the captivating stories of the world's top brands and transforms their lessons into powerful moves for small firm architects and creatives like you. In Season 1, Jeff shares the thrilling tale of Southwest Airlines, where he dissects their journey to the summit and distills it into strategies tailor-made for you.
It's important to keep in mind that companies like Southwest compete in the real world, just like you, and face real-world challenges, just like you. You might be surprised at how similar those challenges are to the struggles that you grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
Don't miss out on your blueprint for success. Subscribe, tune in, and let's build your brand together.
You may have noticed that the very best brands in the world are also known for having somewhat unique corporate cultures. That's often the glue that holds everything together when they encounter those rough spots.
We don't do it because it inconveniences the passengers to whom we are primarily dedicated, the short haul, frequent flyer.
Follow the link in the show notes to subscribe to Build Your Brand today. Remember, no matter the size, the journey's the same. Your brand's journey to the top starts here.